This meeting is being recorded.
Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I would like to invite you to a special episode of Sword and Sandal Cinema. We will be celebrating and honoring the memory of Mark Forrest. Now, as you all know, Hercules movies are one of my life passions, and Mark was and wasn't Hercules. He was in Hercules and the Sons of the Sun. He was in Hercules against the Barbarians, but he was also Makiste in that movie. He was also Hercules against the Mongols, where he, again, was also Makiste. He was in Mole Men against the Son of Hercules, where he was also Makiste. And he played in the Magnificent Gladiator, where he was Hercules, but he wasn't Hercules. And there were a couple of other movies too, where he might have been called Hercules, but that was the only association with the Legend of Renown. And that would be Goliath and the Dragon and the Lion of Thebes, which is very, very iffy. Mark Forrest is someone that I actually spoke to several times over the years. And I learned a lot about him through our conversations and through mutual friends. In addition to being a Peplum star that will be immortal in our memories and in our hearts, he was also involved in opera and I believe dancing and all sorts of other performance arts. So he was a remarkable and multi-talented person. And who can we go for more information? We, of course, have to go to Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater, who is the lore keeper of our community. Greetings and welcome, Brian. Happy New Year.
Oh, Happy New Year, Hercules. How are you this evening?
I'm doing phenomenally well. I was talking to a good friend for a few minutes before we started the show, and I had a great time.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it.
So what can you tell us about the remarkable Mark Forrest?
I have to tell you, when I saw that he passed away just one day after his birthday,
Yes.
he lived a good long life. You're a very fortunate man to live to be nearly 90 years old. He was 89 when he passed on the 7th. I still felt a sense of loss. When Betty White passed away on New Year's Eve, there were so many memes that popped up instantly on Facebook as if to say, she was taken away from us too early at the age of 99. And I felt that way, when he passed away as well. I was like, gee, it was somebody who I felt a certain kinship with. He had three very distinct careers.
Mhm.
And he excelled at all three, which is impossible to do. I mean, I'm on my third career, and I don't know that I've excelled in any of them, but here we are. So that's just something I find really remarkable about Mark Forrest, is that seemingly whatever he set his sights on doing, whether it was bodybuilding, being a legitimate movie star, or working as an opera singer and as a vocal coach, three very distinct and separate things, and to be successful, to be excellent at all three, that's so rare,
Yes.
in a human being. And it is a shame when somebody that talented passes on. It is a big loss, and you do feel it. And I saw so much, I've seen so much, I should say, on social media over the past few days since he passed away about it. And it's good to see, how many people revered Mark Forrest in many, for different things. It might have been for his bodybuilding, which he had a very respectable career as a bodybuilder, owned a gym for a while.
Mhm.
He was Mr. Venice Beach, in
Yes.
1954. And I love looking at all of those old pictures of Muscle Beach and some of the other contests that you can see in certain Facebook groups. And if you look closely, he pops up in a lot of those early to mid 50s photographs on Muscle Beach. And see, he's originally from New York City. He was born in Brooklyn, but in the early 1950s, after competing in some contests around New York City, he relocated to Los Angeles. He was tested for the part of a TV Tarzan, which the project never really got off the ground. And ever since the inception of television series in the US in the late 1940s, several producers had been trying to get a Tarzan television series off the ground. And his was one of the earlier efforts. Later on, producers tried it with Gordon Scott, and while he was in his run as Tarzan, and it didn't get off the ground until the Ron Ely years in the mid 1960s. So that it took about 20 years to bring Tarzan to television, and that's a pretty daunting task. You have to shoot. There's so much location shooting, which is expensive. It's much easier to control atmosphere and sounds if you're in a sound stage. So you're multiplying the complexity of doing a scene when you're outdoors, especially in a jungle looking area, or as well as you could set it. So that's a really ambitious undertaking. And even with Ron Ely, and that was a great series. I don't know if you remember watching it.
Yes, I remember it.
But it only lasted for just a little over 2 seasons. And at the end of it, Ron Ely, as I recall, was pretty banged up. Playing Tarzan is apparently very physically demanding. It nearly killed Jock Mahoney, for example, one of the early 60s Tarzans. But when Mark Forrest, well, his name was actually Lorenzo Luis Degny, or otherwise known as Lou Degny. He didn't pick up the Mark Forrest moniker until he went to Italy, but I don't want to jump ahead too far. After he relocated to the Los Angeles area, he did a couple of bit parts. He's in The Egyptian from 1954, just in a bit role. And he got hired to be part of Mae West's bodybuilding team in her Las Vegas show. A lot of the people featured on the Many Faces of Hercules pages at Bryant's Drive-In Theater came out of the Mae West show. It was a good way to earn some quick cash. And she saw such luminaries as Reg Park, not Reg Park, I'm sorry, Reg Lewis, excuse me, on that one. Gordon Mitchell did it for a while, Mickey Hargitay, Dan Vadas, and Mark Forrest, interestingly. He, in the late 1950s, when Steve Reeves had been so successful with Hercules and Hercules Unchained, the Italian producers wanted him to do a third Hercules movies, which was roughly titled The Revenge of Hercules. Well, while negotiations for this were going on, Steve Reeves had been shooting what's the name of it? I'm trying to think of the name of the movie that he was working on at the time. Goliath and the Barbarians. That's what it was. Or otherwise known as Terror of the Barbarians. They're in the middle of shooting the movie with Steve Reeves, and the production company ran out of money. And the first two productions that Steve Reeves had been involved with were fairly lavish productions. You can tell when there's money being spent on a production. It hits the screen immediately. You can see it pretty easily. And it didn't seem to be there for Goliath and the Barbarians. Interestingly, probably the most popular drive-in movie type studio, which would have been American International Pictures, rescued the Steve Reeves film Goliath and the Barbarians. They sent the Italian producers about $20,000 to get the film done.
Wow.
And by giving them just such a small amount of money, they also got rights for the US to show it. And in the US, the movie grossed nearly $2 million. So they made a lot. That was a lot of money back then, $2 million. But from a $20,000 investment, I mean, that's crazy money. And Nicholas Narkov loved to spend very little on films and liked to see big returns, as any producer would, but particularly Jim Nicholson and Sam Markov. So that gave them a real taste for the peplum genre. You know, they saw big profits, and there were big profits to be made there. Well, after his experience making Goliath and the Barbarians and having the movie almost tank, he wanted a few assurances before he made another movie. And he wanted to be attached, Steve Reeves wanted to be attached to quality productions for a lot of reasons. For one, it's just easier to act in. That's like, when craft services shows up, it's probably a pretty good feeling. So he wanted a few assurances before making that third Hercules movie, Hercules movie, The Revenge of Hercules. And specifically, he wanted the director from his first two Hercules movies, Pietro Francisci. And he was a really busy director and couldn't do the film. So Steve Reeves was just like, yep, I'm out. You know, you're going to have to find somebody else. And the somebody else who was found was Lou Degny. So he proved to be the second American actor being shipped over to Italy to portray Hercules. A couple of things in his favor were that he was a very handsome man, much in the same vein as Steve Reeves. He had some acting ability. He had some stage presence. You know, he was used to live audiences. He was used to the camera. Those things helped, and he could speak Italian, which was probably the biggest feather in his cap as an American actor. You know, he could speak to the director. He could understand what the director was saying. He didn't have to learn the language, you know, while at work, which would be tough. So those two things were really in his favor. Funny enough, you know, here's this American actor originally born in Brooklyn, sent over to Italy. Well, they thought his name didn't sound American enough. It sounded too Italian, as a matter of fact. So much like the Italian sword and sandal actors or Italian peplum actors, they gave him a very American sounding name, which turned out to be Mark Forrest. He was to make the Revenge of Hercules movie, which he did. However, American International is involved in the production of the Revenge of Hercules, and they bankrolled a good part of the production. And when it came time for American International to distribute the movie in the United States, they wanted a movie somewhat different than a Hercules film. They actually wanted another Goliath film. Goliath and the Barbarians made almost $2 million for AIP. And they wanted another cheap blockbuster from Italy. And they wanted to capitalize on the Goliath name, not the Hercules name. So AIP for the U.S. market only retitled the film Goliath and the Dragon, and they inserted a couple of scenes that did not appear in the versions that ran in Europe and Asia. They also redubbed it and rescored it. They got Les Baxter to do a fantastic score for it. If you haven't seen the movie Goliath and the Dragon for a while, and it's Mark Forrest's first starring role, take a look at it and listen to it. I watched it again just yesterday, and I've got this Something Weird version that came out probably, yeah, it came out like 15, 16, 17 years ago. It's a really nice transfer. The sound quality, it's not Blu-ray, but the sound quality is amazing. And watching it, if you'll almost absentmindedly start listening to the soundtrack and think, gosh, the Foley work on this movie is really good. the soundtrack, the score is excellent. It's just far above what we're used to in Peplum films. And actually, I think AIP did a really nice job with the movie in terms of rescoring it and redubbing it as well. It's dubbed very well, better than your usual Peplum film, certainly. And you can see where AIP didn't break the bank on the movie, but you can see where they did spend the money, and I think they spent it very wisely. Unfortunately, you know, whereas all of us probably would have loved to have seen Steve Reeves in another Hercules movie,
I would have.
bringing Mark Forrest over kind of did that in. He never portrayed Hercules on film again. But that's okay. When it came time to do the next Hercules film, which was to be Hercules Conquers Atlantis, Mark Forrest was being managed by his brother and didn't think that the offer was good enough. They'd made some money for AIP, you know, for American International, and they wanted to see some more money on the table. And American International wasn't always famous for paying its talent well, unless you had them over a barrel. So he just said, no, I'm not going to do it. So you'll have to find somebody else. And the somebody else they found was Reg Park. He was cast in the movie Hercules Conquers Atlantis, which most of us know as Hercules and the Captive Women. One of my favorite Peplum films, and it has one of my favorite B-movie actresses, Faye Spain. She's the evil queen in Hercules and the Captive Women, and the movie is just so much fun to watch. I love it.
I love it too.
And unfortunately, if you look at Mark Forrest, if you look at his filmography, golly, there's only 12 films. That's a lot of films to be made in a 4 or 5 year period. But for a filmography, it's a shame that he didn't really seem to want to go on with it. But I guess he had changed his mind for what he wanted to do in life. He did make some great films. Just in watching the comments over the last few days in social media, I know a lot of people really seem to love Goliath and the Sins of Babylon, which, to tell you the truth, is a really excellent Peplum film. And it's got a fantastic cast. I mean, Juliana Gemma's in it, Nemo Palmara, people that you saw in Peplum films. He's in a couple of movies with Ken Clark, who is an American B-movie actor from the 50s and 60s. They act in Hercules Against the Barbarians and Hercules Against the Mongols. Ken Clark has this Mongol makeup on, where they have his eyes taped and they've got this Fu Manchu beard. They did what they could with the makeup. But if you could get past the makeup, it's a really engaging film. I have to say, for my tastes, my favorite Mark Forrest film is actually the first one. It's Goliath and the Dragon. It ostensibly, well, it stars Broderick Crawford, but when you watch the version that we got here in the States, Goliath and the Dragon, as opposed to Hercules, Mark Forrest is actually billed above Broderick Crawford, so he gets top billing, and that's a pretty interesting turn of events. AIP wanted to do their own Peplum films for a hot minute, and Deborah Paget, who had once been a Fox contract player, but when the studio system crashed in the late 1950s, her career went with it. And into the late 50s and early 60s, she was working with AIP. She was still a big name, though, and could draw audiences into a picture. And they wanted to do a Goliath film with Deborah Paget. as the star, but it fell through. They bought, they funded the Revenge of Hercules, and they got their second Goliath film.
And on that note, we'll have to take a very brief break. We had
Okay.
some of our fans send in things that they would like read over the air on today's show. So this is from Patrick Bobat. I always adored Mark Forrest. I'm 64 years old, and I remember the cinemas in the neighborhood of Italians and others where I saw a lot of Italian peplums and westerns. I'm very sad about his disappearance, and he wants to thank Mark Forrest and also Richard Harrison and Kirk Morris. And he says that he thinks that they opened up a whole new era in his life and in our society. And then Rita Belanca wrote, I'm so heartbroken he's gone. My ex-husband Tony and I wrote to him years ago about the films and about his love of opera. And much to our joy, he sent us an incredible autograph and a 5-page letter. Most amazing of all, he then actually called my ex-husband, who was working at the Seattle Opera at the time. It was such a thrill to connect with the magnificent Mac Forrest in such a way. I am so grateful he took the time to connect with us, his fans, on such a level. He will be missed. And last but not least, Vito Indiveri said, thank you, Mark Forrest, for the emotions you made us live through your movies. So I'll let you know if there are more, but that's what we have for now. And back to you, Brian.
Sorry, I shut my mic off for a minute while you were reading. Well, tell me this. I told you what my favorite Mark Forrest movie is. What is yours?
I would say Hercules and the Sons of the Sun. I like
that
the
is a good
other ones. And the reason I like it is because there's real archaeological evidence that the Phoenicians made it to the New World, and that their iconography of Hercules, who was their primary deity as Melkart, they called him, influenced the jaguar god of South America, because there are depictions of the jaguar god holding 2 snakes or fighting a hydra. So there's a lot of evidence that the jaguar god was inspired in part by tales of Hercules from the Mediterranean. So Hercules and the Sons of the Sun brought that like really obscure historical fact and made it into a story that anybody could watch without even knowing that this is based on a reality. But again, I am an eccentric and strange person, so that makes plenty of sense for me.
Eccentric is not strange.
No.
Not at all. I'm trying to think of what day it would have been. I think it was Sunday. I ran Terror of Rome against the Son of Hercules as the movie of the day in order to honor Mark Forrest. And today I'm running Mole Men against the Son of Hercules, which I also have on in the background. So I'm not, if I'm distracted, I'm actually watching a movie and talking to you at the same time. Unfortunately, I couldn't, the copy of Terror of Rome against the Son of Hercules that's available in many different locations, including archive.org, which is my source, is a really good copy. But the copies that I can find of Mole Men against the Son of Hercules are not very good copies. The color's blown out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's watchable, and the sound's okay. I just wish I could find, a better copy of it. I've got my physical media on right now. This is a DVD that I'm playing, and it's really no better than the version that I'm running as today's movie of the day through archive.org. There again, it's a shame. Only 2 of his films appear to be public domain.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore why available. And those are the 2 films of his that were pulled into the Sons of Hercules syndication package. All of those are public domain, but not all of his films are. And particularly since American International was involved in production and distribution several of his films. The AIP and the people who now own the different collections of films that AIP produced and distributed, it can be kind of difficult.
We have a caller.
Okay.
Caller, can you please identify yourself? Okay, if you can, please unmute yourself. We'd love to speak with you. Until then, I'll hand it back to Brian.
Okay, thank you. Like I was saying, there are just two Mark Forrest films of the public domain, and those were the two that I chose to show.
I'm going to be on the Legends of Hercules for until I run out of movies subsequently. I'll be focusing on those Hercules movies, or Hercules-ish, or may have originally been
Adjacent.
And I'll be giving a brief review or my impressions of the film. So I'll be honoring Mark Forrest in that way in the days to come. So it's really great that you're showing the movies on the drive-in.
Well, and I had run both of them fairly recently. But there's nothing wrong, with a rerun. I've at this point, I've had a lot of reruns when it comes to the movie of the day. I keep, with every year, we seem to be picking up more and more films and music into the public domain. Right now, it's what, 1925 is now, works created in 1925 are now part of the public domain. Pretty soon we'll be getting into the 30s in sound films.
Wow.
I do wonder what some of the studios that are still around will do. For example, Mickey Mouse is 1928.
That's a very good question. I know that Conan, in some Conan the Barbarian, I'm a big Conan fan, as everyone knows. He's the Hercules of sword and sorcery genre. In a lot of countries, his adventures are already public domain, and some of them made it into public domain in this country. So now there's a bunch of comic books showing new adaptations of his original stories, but then Conan, the new Conan, is owned still by Conan Properties. So a lot of things that need to be sorted out there.
Yeah, and if we live long enough, perhaps we'll be able to see some of the movies from the 40s and 50s, hitting public domain, which I think is pretty exciting. But like I said, I do wonder what Disney will do with their characters lapsing into public domain. I also like Steamboat Willie, which was the first Mickey Mouse cartoon. That's going to be odd to see, and it's sound as well. It's going to be odd to see that going into the public domain, and as Universal monster films. Universal made two huge movies in 1931, Dracula and Frankenstein. Those will lapse in the public domain pretty soon too. The next 6 years or so. And
the literary characters already have, so that we've seen a lot of new interpretations. We have two callers now. Callers, I can't unmute you from here. That's why I put on my glasses and tried to see if there were any buttons I could press. And you're not showing as muted. Can you please try to identify yourselves?
Hello, Sandal Fitz, Ron Carson.
Hey, Ron Carson, how are you?
How are you? I'm calling for my little guest appearance on this salute to a peplum legend, and you asked me to call at 9:35, and here I am.
Awesome. Now, we grew up watching these movies, and they've of course had a great impact on our lives, and we're still here talking about these movies. So, what would you like to say about Mark Forrest?
What I'd like to say is that, he was a dynamic actor who treated the material like kid gloves, and he had a lot of Hercules influence in him as well, if you remember, because he did a lot of movies with the Hercules moniker throughout his career in the sword and sandal genre, including Mole Men against the Son of Hercules, Colossus of the Arena, Goliath and the Sins of Babylon, Hercules against the Mongols and barbarians, the Lion of Thebes, the Sons of the Suns against Hercules, the Magnificent Gladiator, the Terror of Rome against the Son of Hercules. So, you know, he's a character that you can relate to, Cuz, because of the fact that he pretty much embodies the example of the character that we've all learned to known to grow and love. I mean, he kind of followed in Steve Reeves's footsteps, if you get my drift here.
Yes.
Because Steve Reeves was the original Hercules, of course, on the silver screen. But Mark Forrest would definitely be his runner-up, in my opinion. And from all the times that you and I remember watching these movies on Channel 9 when we were growing up in New York City, it's just a nice homage, so to speak, to kind of like give Mark Forrest the what he's due for in regard to his contributions to the cinema and to the sword and sandal genre himself.
Mm-hmm.
So his untimely passing, ironically, he passed away on the feast day of St. John the Baptist, which was the day after Epiphany, January the 7th. And he was also born, ironically, the same day as your sister, Ellen, on January 6th. So a lot of parallels regarding this actor. And from what I understand, I read on a post on Facebook, you were lucky enough to speak with him at some point.
Yes, several times. We have a mutual friend in common, and I spoke to him. And for a while, when we first launched Sword and Sandal Cinema, we were discussing eventually getting him on the show as a guest, and that didn't go anywhere then. And it was on my list of people to recontact again, but alas, just as with Sergio Chiani, aka Alan Steele, who died within days of my establishing contact with him, I never got to call Mark Forrest again. He left us, and now Brian is honoring his memory by showing movies on Brian's Starring Theater. I'll be doing my impressions of Mark Forrest films on my Legends of Hercules segment. So we're all trying to find some way of honoring the memory of someone who brought us so much through his performances.
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, this is without, you could have taken the words right out of my mouth, Cuz, because of the fact that knowing that he was dedicated to the role, just like Steve Reeves was, he kind of like could say he was Steve's successor. After Steve Reeves abandoned the Hercules portion of his film career, I would say Mark Forrest picked up where he left off, and that's my remembrance of him. That he was a very, very dedicated individual and actor to the sword and sandal medium, and of course the peplum genre too. So, but
now,
I wish that.
That's literally, as Brian pointed out, the third Hercules movie that Steve Reeves was supposed to make was handed to Mark Forrest. So Mark Forrest,
no kidding,
even though it was later retitled and recut and rescored, he did literally carry on in the footsteps of Steve Reeves as Hercules on some level. So your assessment is correct.
Well, was this the one with the mole men that we're talking about?
No, it wasn't. It was supposed to be called The Revenge of Hercules. And Brian, what was that movie ultimately called? The Revenge of Hercules, when it was
It was Mark Forrest's first film, Goliath and the Dragon.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. By the way, fantastic job on your Facebook page in taking us back to this genre that we've all grown to love throughout all our years of following the peplum genre and the sword and sandal cinema. I just wanted to compliment you, being that we're on the same feed over here, to say that your drive-in page is just absolutely awesome. And I keep telling my cousin this, and I just sincerely mean that from the bottom of my heart, Brian. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you, Ron. I appreciate it.
And
My pleasure.
For those who don't know, Brian was named one of our heroes of Peplum fandom recently by Sword and Sandal Cinema, because in addition to being an awesome individual, he has created a shrine to the genre. Although it didn't start off as retro, it's now retro through age, and it celebrates a whole genre, and many genres, in fact, that are retro. So it is an awesome thing, and I encourage everybody to visit Brian's Drive-In Theater.
Well, I definitely will be on board with it when I go online again tomorrow to check out the latest updates and developments. Again, keep up the fine work, Brian. It's nice to talk to you for a change. One of these days we have to meet, all three of us, you, me, and Hercules, and just discuss this marvelous medium of cinema that we've all learned to grow and love ever since we were kids.
Sounds like a great idea.
And then meanwhile, we have Zoom.
Yes, and I'm the unseen character on Zoom because I have no access to a computer. But thank God the cell phone is doing its wonders in having me participate in the forum. So I just wanted to jump in and pay homage to this fantastic performer and actor who was very much a contributor to the Peplum genre. And his memory will remain eternal and everlasting, Sandal.
And I want to thank you for coming on our special tonight. Your segment time is almost up. Is there any way that people can follow your podcast, Ron Carson's Coliseum, and all your other adventures on the Real Radio? How can people find you?
Well, usually the podcasts are at Blog Talk Radio, along with my wonderful hostess, Sweetums herself, Andrea Tutrani. We're the keepers of Ron Carson's Coliseum, and we do a movie review every fourth Tuesday with you, Hercules. And we want you to go back to Blog Talk Radio, where you archive the podcasts and listen to some of the past films that we've pretty much covered. And we're going to do another one in a couple of weeks. So that's without a doubt. And I'm also on the radio. I'm the midday host at WSBS Radio in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. And you can listen to my show either online at WSBS.com, or you can get the free WSBS app on your telephone. And you can have access to the show any Monday through Friday between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. And again on Saturday mornings as well. I am on Facebook. If you would like to friend me, I'd welcome you. I would like you to also endorse our WSBS Facebook page, where I write one article a day on certain topics that happen in the Bay State and throughout our tri-state region. It's a lot of fun, and everybody's welcome to come on board and check it out.
One more thing before you go. You have recently been inducted into the Hall of Fame, and you're the first radio personality in New England to earn that honor.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, back in November, I was bestowed an award where I was the first radio broadcaster to be inducted into the New England Music Hall of Fame, and that's in company of many performers and singers that are enshrined in that particular vehicle. And ironically, I'm going to be interviewing one of the performers that did a concert during the awards ceremony. Kay Bauer from Connecticut is going to be a guest on my Let's Talk segment on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. And she did a wonderful job doing some remakes of great songs from the 60s and 70s. And she's going to be my guest on Let's Talk on Saturday morning. So I invite you to tune in to the free WSBS app or online at WSBS.com and find out what Kay is up to in the wonderful world of music. And that's the sidebar to this whole thing that I'll be talking with her. And she performed during the awards ceremony over in Mystic, Connecticut. But it's an honor that I keep in my heart. and it's an honor that I share with my listeners, my audience, because without my audience, I wouldn't be enshrined in this particular venture, and I take it very humbly in more ways than one.
Well, on that note, thank you so very much, Ron. I look forward to Ron
Yep.
Carson Coliseum. I'll probably communicate with you in some way before then. Yachara kali protochronias, who say in Greek. That means
Thank you. Thank you. Efcharisto.
Roy.
Brian, it was great talking to you, my friend.
Thank you, Ron. Take care.
Okay, and Sweetums and I will be back in a couple of weeks. Okay, Hercules?
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Yachara. And
All right, Kalista.
Kalnikta. We also have another caller coming in. Other caller, can you identify
Okay,
your
go
phone?
for it.
Okay, be well.
Here we go.
Hello?
Yes,
Okay,
this is Michael.
Michael, how are you?
Oh, it's great to be here with this group. I'm just honored to be here. I'd like to say a few words, if I can, about the great Mark Forrest.
Oh, of
And
course.
it's great to hear Brian. He's doing such a tremendous job. I mean, there's no one else out there, I think, doing it the way Brian is doing it, and it's just
I agree.
tremendous. For me, Mark Forrest had the most complete package. The Sword and Sandal film star. I mean, he had the looks, he had eloquent speaking voice, and his fine muscular development was like, at the top of the list, to say the least. I was always very impressed with physique-wise, with his taper. I think he had, frankly, the best pectoral development in the game, and he just a fantastic physique look, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But for the last 30 years, and it's incredible how some things stay with you. For the last 30 years, out of all of the Peplin films, there was one scene that always stayed in my mind. And going back 30 years, over 30 years really, is a long time. And when I watch the film again, it impresses me just as much now. And that was the first scene in The Mole Man against the son of Hercules, where he's pulling that whale from the ocean. I'm sure you know the scene I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He's pulling that. It was a scene that, right from my childhood, always remained with me. The power that his physique displayed, the imagery of pulling that whale in from the ocean, was a scene that simply always stayed in my mind for over 30 years. Whenever I thought of Sword and Sandal, whenever I watched another Sword and Sandal film, that's the one scene that remained with me. I thought it was a very powerful scene, and his physique was just fantastic. And that's, in fact, my mouth was open. I'm still aghast as I watch it. A perfect scene for a Sword and Sandal adventure. And his physique was just remarkable. And he also had a charm about him in his acting. Goliath and the Dragon, the same way. There was a certain charm about him. He really had the whole package. There was my two favorites, I guess, at this point in my life, in the Sword and Sandal genre, putting Steve Reeves aside for a moment. We know he was the king, if you will. My two favorites are probably Mark Forrest and Brad Harris. Brad Harris, I thought, physique-wise, also had outstanding physique as far as muscle density. His speech may not have been as eloquent as Mark Forrest, but Mark Forrest had the complete package. And Goliath and the Dragon was another masterpiece as far as I was concerned. So imaginative, so creative in the various scenes that he was involved in. So for me, Mole Man against the son of Hercules was probably my favorite Mark Forrest film. And what was the name of the co-star again? His name is slipping my mind. The muscular gentleman, I believe he also passed away as well. Do you know who I'm talking about? Unfortunately, his name is not with me right now. Paul Winter. Paul Winter, who co-starred with Mark Forrest in Men Against the Son of Hercules. Paul Winter also did a fantastic job. And between the two of them, they really made that film everything it was, as far as I'm concerned. So for me, that film was really the pinnacle of Mark Forrest's career. And that for me was Men Against the Son of Hercules.
I have fond memories of that with all the Sons of Hercules series. For every now and then during the course of the year, I just play the song to motivate me while I'm working out.
Mm-hmm. I thought that film was one of his best. And again, Paul Winter also did a fantastic job in that film.
Now, Michael, these Peplum actors, like with me, they motivated me to work out, and I still work out to the Sword and Sandal movies. You know, I'll pop one in the DVD and I'll work out, and I don't even really have to watch them anymore. And in some ways, they've all blended together into one big mythology. But it does motivate me working out, and you've expressed the same, that it motivates you in working out as well.
The films have transformed my life. The films have transformed my life. And at this age, pushing 70 years old, that says something. Those films transformed my life throughout the many trials and tribulations of my life. Those films really held my spirit up and held me together. The memories of those films. And it'll be with me till the day I die. A big Peplum fan. From 16 to the present age, and they'll always be with me.
And for those who don't know, Michael has a show called Bold Spirits Holistic Concepts, where he discusses his personal as well as a collective quest for the Golden Fleece, which right now is optimal wellness for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our community. Michael also does occasional Sword and Sandal cinema segments when he can, and sometimes during his show. Michael, how can people contact you and follow your work in the Sword and Sandal cinema genre?
Well, they can listen to our program, which is on the second Monday of every month, and I'll be discussing many of my favorite Sword and Sandal films at that time. And we'll be able to share the many great memories of these films. And I look forward to it because for me, especially in my youth, they gave me the courage, the inspiration that I needed against some formidable opposition in school at that time. They incited the warrior within me, and I needed that. And the only source for that was the Sword and Sandal cinema. I carried the memories of those heroes with me, and they got me through so many aspects of my life. So every second Monday of the month, hopefully, I'll be discussing some of my favorite stars as well as my favorite films. So thank you for that.
And thank you for calling in. You've graced our show with your presence, and I look forward to speaking with you soon, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Be well. And moving on to the next segment, we have Nicholas Diak and Michele Brittany, our scholars from the edge of time, and also our fellow hosts of Sword and Sandal cinema segments. Greetings and welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, sir.
Good evening, Hercules.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing very well. And you?
I'm doing very well also. Above you is Brian Walker. I don't know if you guys have met yet.
Good evening, Brian.
Been to your website many times.
Yes, we have.
Well, thank you. I love hearing that.
It's definitely old school. It takes me back to surfing the net back in the 90s, and I appreciate that vaporwave aesthetic.
Well, that's when I learned HTML code, so that that adds to its 90s feel.
Well, one is
Now-
it's a great resource too. So
Yes, it is.
Terrific. Thank you.
Nicholas, in case you weren't aware, wrote the book on the new peplum. The book. It's actually titled The New Peplum.
Oh, there we
And
go.
it's a post-gladiator peplum. And he has a website where anything that is happening, regardless of how small a detail in this niche, he has it covered. So everyone can be very well aware of what's going on. I believe he's working on a sequel right now to the new peplum. And he's opened the door to Sword and Planet adventures. And he's also come up with a way of classifying all the subtle subdivisions in what we call a Sword and Sandal cinema. So I'm looking forward to that being finished. And Michele Brittany, who I'm going to be naming one of our heroes in the next day or two, she is the keeper of all things Egyptian, including Egyptian peplums. She is the doorway to all these esoteric things, including mummies. So, you know, whether you're a horror fan or whether you're a peplum fan, Michele is a person to talk about all things Egyptian. And together they also have a podcast on Lovecraftian type of things. So they're among the most creative people I know, and I'm glad that you're both here.
oh, thank you so much, Hercules. That's wonderful to be here.
Thank you, sir.
And you guys have a review of one of Mark Forrest's movies for us.
A little bit. I mean, we've talked about it on one of your episodes a while ago. We could do a little refresher of it. But I don't know too much of Mark Forrest stuff. I mean, we have, you know, got the giant box set that's got, I think, about 7 of his films of, and basically going through them. But we watched Hercules against the Mongols, you know, a couple months ago, and did a refresher tonight. But a side little anecdote, back before I got into peplum, I was writing about Euro spy stuff. I was really submerged into the Italian knockoffs of James Bond stuff. And that stuff appeared in Michele's book, James Bond and Popular Culture. And so I wasn't into peplum yet. I was more into Italian Euro spy stuff, you know, like Agent 077. And, you know, a lot of those peplum actors went to Euro spy, like Richard Harrison did a lot of them. And I don't know, I hold Richard Harrison as like the best American actor appearing in his films. But no, I had a colleague I never met before in Germany reach out, and he was working on a book or something for a school that he was actually going to be stateside for a couple months going through archives, but his project focused on interviewing American actors who had worked over in Italy in the 60s. And, you know, he got to speak with Mark Damon and a whole bunch of other folks. But he told us Mark Forrest is one of the folks he got to speak to. So I'm like, oh, well, I wonder if he knows that, you know, Mark Forrest has passed away. And we'll have to reach out to him and see if where his interview is. Was it something recorded? Was it something transcribed? And see if we can get that out. That'd be interesting to hear / see.
Yeah, definitely. So we did rewatch the movie. Do you want to give a little plot synopsis?
As best I can. So Hercules against the Mongols is not really a Hercules movie per se. It's a Michele film. But, you know, it's one of those, hey, let's, you know, redub it, re-edit it, and give it to the American audience as a Hercules film. Basically, yeah, Hercules is up against 3 sons of Genghis Khan, and these 3 sons have, you know, plans of conquest. There's a medieval country nearby that, you know, they lock away the princess or whatever, you know, the
Princess, yeah.
the one lady of the entire movie. You know, and Hercules kind of likes her, kind of doesn't, but he gives up his freedom to set her free. But let's just be honest, you can't trust any, you know, bad guys in a peplum film. I mean, once they overthrow a throne, you know, are you gonna trust them? So anyway, you know, Hercules challenges all 3 to combat. And what makes Hercules versus the Mongols kind of an interesting one is, you know, the people he's up against, they're kind of strong men themselves. You know, they're basically anti-peplum villains. You know, they got muscles. They're showing off the same type of features that a normal strongman would. So, he's not up against like just like a tyrant that just sits on the throne all day, and other people do his work. So it's kind of interesting to see kind of strongman versus strongman. Well, Hercules eventually is in slavery. He fights a lion. That was kind of a sad scene because the lion didn't want to be there. Hercules, eventually becomes free. He leads the army of this other medieval town back to the city that the Mongols have taken over. He frees the girl that, didn't like him, but did anyway, because, she's kind of flippy floppy with her relationships.
She did not have good intel.
She didn't have good intel. I'm sorry, when like the court, lawyer, I'm just going to call him that, when he even looks like a stereotypical wart-faced evil, dude, you don't trust that guy, especially says, you could trust me. That's the last thing someone that will trust you will say.
Right.
But no, it's a pretty big spectacle of a classic sword and sandal film. There's lots of big sequences of armies battling. In fact, that there are quite a few scenes of Hercules, Mark Forrest in this, doing hand to hand, but the movie takes a lot of time to pan away from him to show action going elsewhere of marauding people on horseback, big siege towers coming in. It's actually quite like they all are, a big spectacle.
Mm-hmm. And what makes, I would say, Hercules against the Mongols rather also interesting is the fact that Mark Forrest, part of it is, his body is a spectacle based on the shape. It was rather unique, very, very defined. I was reading that his muscles were such, he did certain exercises that emphasized different muscles. And so he had a very unique kind of heart-shaped physique. He was also seemed to be more personable as a Hercules in the films, as well as he seemed to be more sensitive. Like he interacts with kids, he interacts with children.
He's got a bigger heart that's easy to take advantage of.
Well, and it just seems like it's more important to him to help others. And the fact that he's willing to be enslaved and imprisoned so that way the princess can be let go.
And she totally rebuffs him anyway.
Yes, so she goes off. But there's definitely the spectacle throughout. And I would say, like Nick and I were talking about the fact that in several scenes, he picks up large trees, a huge column, a stone pillar.
Wait, this Hercules is very tree centric. At the beginning of the film, he's uprooting a tree to go across the river. Quarter of the way from the film, he's uprooting a tree and swinging it at some raiders. There's some other scenes, I believe, that he's picking up other clubs and stuff, and he's a very tree centric deforester. Mark Forrest is. Okay, I'm sorry, that was a bad pun. We're here to celebrate.
That was a bad pun. But, like we were talking about too, the fact that these are props. He's not carrying around a huge real tree. But the fact is there's still talent there that's required because he's got to be able to leverage these props.
You got to sell it.
And sell it at the same time. And he does a very great job at selling the fact that he is a strong man and he is engaged in these different activities to show off his physique. Very, very enjoyable film, actually. Very much enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to actually seeing some more Mark Forrest films.
Well, we got the box set here. We'll hold that up again, and we'll see what we could do for one of the future programs and for this repertoire.
And let us hope that YouTube in their infinite wisdom doesn't copyright strike us because of the box. That's happened before, which led to our first lost episode because in the process of transferring it, I somehow lost it and I wasn't able to find it. So we shall find out and see.
You can put up a big censored sign in post-production.
My next step is learning some editing. When I get there, this time I'll keep the file and I'll put a censored thing on it. So Before you guys go on, I want to thank you for being here on our first Zoom tribute show. You guys are always doing amazing things, and you encouraged me to do something which led to, in a couple of years, my being like having written for like 19 different anthologies and becoming a published person with an author page on Amazon and Goodreads. And that was your suggestion, so I thank you for that. But you guys are you're among the busiest people I know in terms of your creativity. What new projects are you currently working on?
Well, I am working on a brand new edited collection of essays. I just put a call for papers out discussing the Highlander franchise. So that will fit within our kind of sword and sorcery, and as we get talking into that. That's what I'm currently working on. Trying to think what else. Working on the podcast, obviously. How about you?
Well, we got an academic conference coming up that we're going through the papers right
Yeah,
now.
that's true.
Happen to have one of your books right here, Hercules.
I'm honored.
There you go. So what am I working on? Essays for Michele for Highlander. Got an academic conference in May that we got to go through and figure out what presentations we're going to accept. I got an essay due at the end of this month on the old Weird Tales magazine. And later this year, I will maybe be doing a call for papers for the Emmanuel series of films because, well, it's never been done before, so why not? And then in this year, I have a lot of stuff coming out. My Gladiator essay is finally getting published. My Encounter of the Unknown is getting published. So, oops, me to come in. So I'm really excited that a lot of stuff that I've written last year or the year before during the pandemic is actually seeing the light of day, like in legitimate academic books and stuff.
Extremely awesome. And where can people go to find you and to follow you and to hook into all the really cool things you do?
Well, I'm at nickdiak.com, nickdiak.com. I do a weekly roundup of personal news, but also Peplum news. All my social media links is there. I have a lot of essays there as well. Got a giant podcast directory of all the stuff that Michele and I appear in, which is also a giant directory of stuff of Hercules.
I'm honored.
And I'm at michellebrittany.com. That's where you can find my call for papers, as well as at Nick's website. You can also look at my author page at Amazon. And I'm trying to think, we'll be having a Scholars from the Edge of Time later this month, the fourth Thursday of the month, which we'll be talking about. Go for it.
Is it your? We love your.
Yes, we'll be talking about your. So we're looking forward to it, and
Guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
Same here.
But we really do appreciate the time to be able to come on and give our review of Mark Forrest's Hercules Against the Mongols, and we will look forward to exploring him more, particularly since he only did like 3 movies.
13.
13 films in order to pay for his opera lessons. So go figure. Interesting person.
Very, very interesting. I remember in our conversations, because again, I only knew him through the Peplum. The few conversations we had, he was telling me all this stuff, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And then I spoke to our mutual friends, like, oh yeah, proceeded to tell me all these stories. Thank you both for being here. You're incredibly awesome, and you always do awesome things. And thank you for sharing them with us. And I look forward to speaking with both of you very soon.
Well, thank you for having us, sir. We hope y'all have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you later this month. And good to see you face to face, Brian.
Awesome.
Nice to see you, Nick. Nice to see you, Michele.
Thank you
And
so
now-
much, Felix.
And thank you so much. You're very welcome. And now back to Brian.
And I'm back. And I got to say, listening to Michele and Nick talk, your Hunter from the Future is one of my favorite movies.
Yes,
And it is a guilty pleasure. I can remember seeing that film on, I believe it was HBO. That was the only the feature film cable channel, like from 40 some years ago. And I remember, I'm almost positive Yor was on HBO. I could be wrong, but it was on some channel that I saw it on. And I was just riveted by it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was such an unusual movie. Back then, they were making very many unusual sword and sorcerer movies. I guess for lack of a name, and that didn't really fit the mold. But it was a fascinating movie and a fun movie all the same. I really enjoyed that. They were talking about a sequel of that as well. I don't remember if it was on one of your shows that we talked about it or one of the shows with Nick and Michele. But at one point there were discussions of a sequel.
Well, the version of Yor that was released theatrically by Columbia is a really heavily edited version of a TV miniseries. And I know the first time watching Yor, I loved the film, but it was a little hard to follow because it was so deeply cut, in the editing process. It could have stood another 10 or 15 minutes of film, quite honestly, to smooth over some of the more questionable patches of the plot. But it is a lot of fun. And Reb Brown, the actor who portrays Yor, is still with us. He's on Facebook fairly often, and seems to be very excited to interact with his fans, which is always a nice thing,
Yeah, most certainly so. So I'm sure we'll be getting more Yor in the days ahead. Do you have anything else you'd like to add about Mark Forrest?
Oh, just something that everybody has mentioned. Ron, Michael, Nicholas, Michele, is that Mark Forrest really was the successor to Steve Reeves, in several different ways. And when other bodybuilders will mention a specific influence in their lives, so many of them will say Steve Reeves. But in doing research for tonight's podcast, I was surprised at how many people mentioned Mark Forrest as being a big influence on them. Whereas a lot of people would look at Steve Reeves and say, oh, this is what I want to achieve. In this instance, Mark Forrest actually physically helped some of the other bodybuilders when he was after he moved to Southern California and was working out on Venice Beach and such. Larry Scott, who passed away a few years ago, cited Mark Forrest as one of his main inspirations and credited him for showing him how to build up parts of his body that he just hadn't been able to do. I mean, Larry Scott was naturally kind of a skinny guy, and the skinny guys really have trouble putting on bulk.
Yes.
People like me, I can eat, a bowl of rice and like gain a couple of pounds, which is ideal, for a body. I'm not a bodybuilder, but it's ideal for a bodybuilder. But for somebody skinny like that, whose metabolism's already pretty revved up, it's so hard for them to put on mass and muscle mass. And Mark Forrest showed Larry Scott how to do it. And helped him bulk up. And there's several other bodybuilders who credited Mark Forrest as being just a personal inspiration to them. Say, hey, he personally helped me out, or here's a technique that he showed me that I would never have known, and this helped me develop this part of my body. Stories like that are really interesting and fun to hear as well. Whenever you are looking at a collection of people that we consider the best, it's always interesting to hear who their best, their top picks are. And Mark Forrest lands in that top spot a lot in a lot of different ways. Perhaps it's his films, or maybe his earlier bodybuilding career, or maybe his later career, as an opera singer and vocal coach. But for somebody like him who could touch so many different people in many different ways, and like I said, I really felt. I know I said this at the beginning of the of tonight's podcast, but I really felt a kinship with him in that he had three distinct careers, yes, and so have I, and that's sort of been the hallmark of my overall career. Is that there have been three completely different pieces of it.
I can identify with that.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't know that I've been successful in all three or not, but he certainly was. And got what a legacy to leave. You're good at everything. That's fantastic.
He also had a spiritual dimension. I was discussing with him the possibility of doing a show on that, because that's something that I couldn't find anything on anywhere. And that was such an important part of who he was. Like for instance, with me, I make sense if you understand that everything on some level is Greek mythology. Everything. I can't think of hardly anything that isn't, to some degree or other. So with Mark Forrest too, it wasn't Greek mythology, it was Judeo-Christianity that was his thing, but that seemed to color his entire world as well, and he was really into it. And nobody really explored that. And there were people that he had, just like people say great things about him in terms of acting, in terms of bodybuilding, in terms of opera and so forth. People in his faith group, I guess, they had high opinions of him based on his spiritual life. So I think that would have made a really fascinating show, because that's the invisible area of accomplishment that he didn't really share publicly. And as you pointed out, he's been an inspiration to me for the same reason, is that he didn't just do one thing, he did several things, and he got really good at all of them. And he left behind a global legacy, not just a local legacy or a family legacy. So that's a major accomplishment, and that's something to admire, and that's something to learn from for all of us.
It certainly is. And as I was watching his filmography, and it's a shame that he only did 12 movies. I think he probably could have gone on to some other roles had he not wanted to make a change in career. He could certainly have rolled into the spaghetti westerns. And as Michele mentioned, your spy films, where so many of the Peplum stars went, to good effect, by the way.
Yes.
But in his films, they are very different from those of Steve Reeves. Even the first one, Goliath and the Dragon, or the Revenge of Hercules. Steve Reeves is more of an intense Hercules. He's all business. There's no joking around or anything like that. And Mark Forrest's Hercules is way more lighthearted, and dare I say, a little more human. Perhaps a little more down to earth. And in Goliath and the Dragon, there's several very lighthearted segments in it, where after a tense scene, there will be a laugh or something like that to sort of break the tension. And that's fun to see. I don't know about you, but as I'm watching a film, I often get kind of emotionally wrapped up in it if I'm really absorbed in it. And it does make you kind of tense, if you're watching an action scene and you don't know if the hero is going to make it. And those little pauses at the end of the scene where something comedic does happen, something lighthearted will transfer between a couple of the characters. It's sort of a stress reliever, in a way. I don't know if you get as emotionally invested as I do when you're watching something.
For some things, yeah. For some things, are just casual watching, and again, I've seen them so many times that it's okay if they'll blend together with a lot of things, other things seen sometimes, but some things you have to immerse yourself in it and live it. And the intensity of that living is one of our is one of our members of the social media groups has stated. You know, that's a very powerful thing when an actor and a producer and a director and everybody can pull off those moments where you're elevated or depressed or transformed in some way. So yeah, I agree with you.
Well, that's the hallmark of good filmmaking as well. You know, if you touch your audience's emotions, that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, that means you're doing a good job. That means you're being effective.
And any plans ahead for the drive-in, things we should look forward to?
Well, actually, I think I said this a few weeks ago, but it's time to go back through the drive-in, do some more cleanup work on it, and spruce things up a bit. It really needs a facelift. It hasn't had one since 2010. That's 12 years, and I'm having a cat fight right now, so ignore the sound. And I've already embarked upon trying to spruce things up a bit, and I look forward to keeping that going throughout the new year. And that's not a resolution, that's a goal.
Good. And again, as you're hearing from other people as well, and I'm sure you hear all the time, you created something, what do you call it? Your creativity expresses itself in many ways, but the drive-in is something. It's a monument. It's your Acropolis, your Colosseum. You know, you created something truly, truly, truly amazing with that.
And it needs a little love right now. it needs a little TLC from Brian, and it's going to get it this year. That's one of the things that I really look forward to when I am able to retire, most likely next year, is having a little more free time in order to do some things with it. Working on a website can be a serious time suck.
Yes.
You can lose. I mean, I was doing just a little bit of work today, and I lost the better part of the afternoon, just tweaking a few things. Maybe that means I'm not the greatest manager of time.
No, it does need your time. I'm a pretty good manager of time, and yesterday and today, just unexpected things that were related to the podcast and the Zoom shows and all this other stuff that usually keeps turning like a wheel, demanded so much attention that I didn't get to work out yesterday at all, and today I'm working out very late. So those things are and can be very time-consuming of late.
Yes, they can, and then a demanding career on top of it can certainly get in the way. But yeah, that's one of my big goals for the year, though, is to give the drive-in a refreshing. And so far, we're only 11 days into January, but I've held fast. At least for 11 days. So we'll see where I get with it.
And how can people contact you, and how can they find the Coliseum and check it out? Check out the old ruins. Well, no, they're not ruins, but the old Coliseum before we see the new drive-in theater.
You can watch things happen in real time if you find the right page that I'm working on. If you go to briansdrivein-theater.com, I have about 400 actor pages there. There's a little something for everybody, different genre and so forth. And I guarantee you've heard of a lot of these people if you've never visited the drive-in theater before. On most of the actor pages, you'll find perhaps at least a trailer, if not one of their entire feature films, or maybe even a television appearance that they made in the 1950s or 60s. All of that's at briansdrivein-theater.com. And if you want to interact with me on social media, the best place to do that is Facebook, and you can just go to Facebook and then type Brian's Drive-In Theater in the search box. I am on Twitter, but I'm a lurker on Twitter. I don't really post anything anymore. So you can follow me on Twitter, but you're probably not going to see a whole lot of activity coming from me, unfortunately.
And as you pointed out, there's 400 pages of material there. And I think I've suggested this before, but I think because what I did when I first found your site, because I didn't know how long it would be up, because again, there's the internet back then, and
yeah.
I was amazed
Even now, yeah.
This was there at all. So what I did was, and ink was a lot cheaper back then, I printed out every single page and I had a loose leaf binder. So this way, if the site disappeared, I had all that information, because you did a really great job with that. And then I'd update it occasionally as you added new things. Then I couldn't do that anymore. But I think that maybe taking like even just the many faces of Hercules and then starting with that and then going to the other sections, I think you got to be a series of books there. And you certainly have images that, so I think you have a series of books, or if you want to start off with chapters and anthologies like I did, and now I'm graduating to books, I think that'd be an awesome thing, and it would further immortalize your legacy.
Well, in terms of legacy, on February 1st, it will be the 24th birthday or anniversary, however you want to say it, that is, of the drive-in. So, and that's just in about 3 weeks.
Awesome. We have to celebrate. And
Yes.
Thank you so very much, Brian. You're awesome. I had a great time tonight, as always, and I look forward to our next conversation. And to those who've joined in on YouTube, if we haven't been copyright stricken, thank you for joining us. Until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys, amazing adventures, and a healthy and happy new year. Good night, everyone.
Good evening.